Hello, Simon Rainier, Lynx Armatari out of Capoferro, British Columbia, and let's talk some rapier. Specifically, as recorded by Rodolfo Capoferro. Pop quiz for all of those who know Capoferro and know a little bit about his system. How many guards does Capoferro have? How many guards does he say are guards? Is it 4? Prima, Secunda, Terza, quarta? Is it 6? Do you add in Quinta, sesta? All those answers are wrong. Capoferro says there is 1 guard and 1 guard only. Terza. The reason for that, he says, is because all of the other positions don't really provide enough cover. They're all striking positions, not guards. And then he goes on later to describe them as guards. So take that for what you will. Anyway, Terza, as per Capoferro, is the one true guard. But there are other ones. I'm not going to get too bogged down in the technicalities of how, because I would rather, for today, talk about the why. Starting with the 3rd guard, because that seems a good enough place to start. Terzeguardia, or 3rd guard. I'm using a dagger here as well because rapier and dagger is cool, and because the Quinta Sesta guards are only shown with the dagger, but it's not necessary even when you're using those weird positions. Anyway, sword is along the center line, body's in profile, front toe pointed always directly forward, and the dagger just kind of rests behind the sword, more or less on the same line. A nice fun little trick for getting the dagger forward without bringing the shoulder forward is to stand in the guard and then just give your shoulder a little shrug, and it'll bring your dagger just a little bit closer to you. This is, as Capoferro says, a really great guard position. It's a small motion to cover either the inside or outside line. If someone strikes our feet, we just pull back and the sword is right there threatening them. It is an absolutely fantastic place to start. Almost always start in Terzeguardia, or Terza, or 3rd, or whatever you want to call it. It is providing a clear and present threat with the point, which is good. Moving on a little bit, we have our Prima guard, or 1st guard, which is mostly a position where we draw the sword out of a scabbard and find ourselves in our Prima. It is rough on the shoulder if you're not used to it, so it's a good idea to practice it. It is, again, tip providing a clear and present threat. Not really talked about a whole lot, not really done a whole lot in the sort of free fencing and or tournament scene. Part of that is because, I believe, of the physical strain it puts on your shoulder. However, I kind of like it as a starting position. Approaching into measure in Prima makes it so that your sword is providing a threat, but is a challenge to control. Binding or stringering your sword in Prima is difficult. And one of my favorite little moves is when they engage my sword, drop the hilt down, and pop up the tip for a nice little boar's thrust. So that's why you might want to use that one. Secunda and quarta. Secunda with the palm down, quarta with the palm up, are mostly positions in which you have engaged the opponent's sword and are moving in for that final strike. There are some advantages, however, to standing in them. Namely, they're kind of fun for spinning into cuts. Yes, you can cut with the rapier, particularly with quarta. If I cheat out the sort of the hilt a little further, what it does is it gives a clear line from my opponent's sword down to my body, which they will be, no doubt, tempted to strike towards. As they do, roll around, deliver a nice honkin' cut. That's a reason why you might choose that guard. Same kind of thing with Secunda on the other side. Doesn't work quite as well, but it can be done. Next up, I want to zip right through those ones because the ones I really want to talk about are Quinta and Sesta. Quinta, Sesta. These positions withdraw the point from your opponent. This leads to, yes, slightly slower attacks, but prevents the opponent from binding and controlling your blade, which in a lot of situations can be extremely advantageous. In fact, when you get up to a certain level of fighting, the withdrawn position, particularly this one, or a variation thereof, is probably one of the most common positions you will come across. Because it's still, tip is still online, still providing that threat. Dagger is forward. The dagger is a really excellent defensive tool. No surprises there. So when we are in this position, it feels really safe. A lot of times people will do opposite leg, rear leg forward. This is kind of the guard of SCA Rapier, at least in my experience, is here. And it feels really strong and advantageous, and if you know how to use it, it is. There are a couple of disadvantages, however. Your offhand generally doesn't have nearly as much protection as your rapier, generally, so that it becomes a target, and it also brings your body in a wider target area. It's really hard to stay perfectly profiled with that other arm forward. So, something to keep in mind on that score. My absolute favorite guard position, though, would have to be Quinta. It is fantastic. It provides a lot of the same advantages as many of the other guard positions, with fewer of the disadvantages. It is virtually impossible to control my sword if I'm holding the tip low. Not absolutely impossible, there's ways to do it. If someone holds a sword in a position where their point is not directly pointed at you, aim your sword at their wrist. It's almost always going to get you in a good place. Not a lot of people know that. Spread it around. As we are here, it also eliminates any kind of strain on our bodies. Right? This is a very comfortable position to be in. If my opponent is doing all the forward positions, they're going to be getting tired. And I'm not. I'm just cozy. I'm waiting. Another nice little advantage there. But the best possible way of doing things from here is, as I bring my sword forward to strike, I can choose which side of their sword/body I strike on, really without giving it away or even having to make a decision until the very last possible second. Bring my sword up, whichever way they think I'm going, I go the opposite way. Keeping, of course, our order of operations where sword moves first, body, foot. Gives us that most amount of time to make a decision, and I can even kind of change my mind halfway through. Coming towards this line, decide, nope, that's the one I want to go to. So, that's my favorite guard for Capoferro's Rapier. Now, one of the key things to keep in mind as well is, as you're here, keep your body leaned away because you want that extra distance of my face away from their sword. Always a good idea. Any of the other positions, like if you want to come forward, that's not within Capoferro itself, but it is acceptable. You find it in other systems. If your sword is down here, don't stick your face in it unless you're really, really confident in your timing, distance, etc. So, as you can see, we very nicely divide things between sword forward or sword withdrawn. Which is better? Depends on how you want to fight. Sword forward provides really, really fast defenses. It does provide your opponent the chance to control your sword. Sword point withdrawn, less defensive in terms of speed. It takes me, if someone's striking towards, for example, the shoulder and just kind of ignoring the dagger for a minute, if my sword is down, it's a big motion to defend myself instead of a small motion to defend myself. But they can't control my sword while I am approaching measure. Which kind of brings us to another point. It's a little harder to gauge measure with your sword pulled back. It just is. One of the things to kind of watch out for is that gauging of measure. Learn how to do it without sticking your sword out. Sticking out there, I can gauge measure very, very precisely. As I'm bringing it back in, I'm throwing a lot further, so it can be something of a challenge. We don't want to overthrust or underthrust. Underthrust is when we fall short of our opponent and just kind of left dangling there. Overthrusting is when we bend our sword in half on them, and a lot of people don't like that. If we were hypothetically using sharp swords, you only need like a hand span at most of penetration. A hand span is enough to basically go through an entire person's body. That is the farthest in you want to stab someone, really. Yeah, you see things of like images of people like going into the hilt. Hooking on the sword reminded me of something. We'll get to that in a second. You see images of people going into like hilt deep with a rapier thrust. Don't do that, even though it's documented. Reasons are very simple. If we're fighting with sharp swords, now it's a lot harder to withdraw your sword. And also, if they are still alive and kicking, you're the one going to get kicked because you've suddenly put yourself right in there and taken your weapons away, basically. One other thing to keep in mind when you're when you're using your sword in a withdrawn position, particularly if you have a little hooked quillion there. There was a time I was fighting, embarrassingly, I think it was actually in a tournament, where I didn't notice I was here that my sword had gotten hooked in my pocket. And as I lunged forward, it got pulled back, and I just nicely presented them like, please just stab me in the face. That was embarrassing. So watch out for that one. Anyway, basically, figure out how you want to fight. Do you want to keep your sword forward? A lot of times when you're beginning, sword forward is a really good place to be because it's a little bit simpler, a little bit safer in a lot of ways. Or do you want to deny your opponent the chance to control your sword? Let me tell you, it can be extremely frustrating fighting someone who doesn't let you control them. I don't know about you, but I kind of just want to like have total control over every aspect of the fight until I stab them. So, with that in mind, hopefully that's kind of covered given something to think about do I want to be forward? Do I want to be away? Forward, away. Yeah, we'll do more stuff with this kind of thing eventually, I'm sure. I really like the rapier as a weapon. It's pretty cool. Anyway, have a good day.